Hi everyone. My name is Nora Vance. I'm 31 years old. For 23 years I cooked my brother's meals, cleaned his room, folded his laundry, and stood just outside every family photo while my parents called him the one who mattered. And the first time anyone stopped the pattern was at my grandmother's while reading when my mother told me to wait outside. The lawyer looked up and said, "No, she stays." The room went quiet when he said it. Not loud quiet, not shocked gasping, worse. The kind of silence that makes every person in the room suddenly aware of the roles they were expecting everyone else to play. My mother had one hand on the conference room door and the other around her purse strap. My father was already seated, legs crossed, wearing the expression he used whenever he expected the world to confirm his importance. My younger brother, Leo, was looking at his phone like grief was something other people were there to handle. And me, I was standing half in the hallway, half out of it, exactly where my mother had placed me. "Just wait outside," she had said softly, like she was protecting me from something. "This is family business, family business." That phrase had followed me my whole life like a locked door. I was family enough to scrub pans, steam dress shirts, carry trays, and miss sleep, just never family enough to sit down first. The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, took off his glasses and looked directly at my mother. "Miss Vance, your grandmother gave very clear instructions. Nora remains in the room for the entire reading." My mother blinked. My father straightened in his chair. Leo finally looked up. And for the first time in my life, I felt something small and dangerous uncurl inside me. Because my grandmother had been dead for 6 days. And she was still the only person in the family who knew exactly where I belonged. But the truth is, that room did not begin with her will. It began in our kitchen 23 years earlier with a chair I wasn't allowed to sit in. My brother Leo was 4 years younger than me. But from the day he was born, my parents acted like he had arrived carrying a crown nobody else was supposed to touch. My mother called him her miracle boy. My father called him the future of the family. I called him Leo because somebody needed to. By the time I was 8, I was making his toast before school. By 10, I was laying out his clothes. By 12, I knew how he liked his grilled cheese, how long to microwave his socks when he said they felt cold, and exactly how fast I had to clean the upstairs bathroom before my mother came home from work and found a reason to say I was lazy. Leo never had chores. Leo had potential. That was the language in our house. He needed rest for baseball. He needed space for school. He needed calm because boys were different. If he left dishes in the sink, I was told to stop nitpicking. If I left one glass on the table, my mother would stand in the doorway and say, "You are going to make a terrible wife if you keep acting spoiled." Spoiled. I was 13 the first time that word made me laugh internally because by then I had already figured out something important. People like my parents accuse the wrong child of selfishness when they are trying to hide where all the service is coming from. The strange part is that none of this looked dramatic from the outside. There were no screaming matches every day, no sensational cruelty. That's why families like mine survive in public for so long. Everything was polished, quiet, explainable. Leo got the bigger bedroom because he was a boy. I learned to cook because it was good for me. I stayed home from dances because someone had to help grandma after her hip surgery. Though somehow Leo was never available for that kind of love, and grandma saw all of it. Not at once, not in some movie moment where she burst in and saved me. She saw it the way older women often see the truth, by noticing who is always on their feet when everyone else is sitting down. She noticed I served every holiday plate and ate last. She noticed my mother calling me from the living room to refill Leo's soda, while he was sitting closer to the kitchen than I was. She noticed that when relatives came over, my father bragged about Leo's future, but introduced me by saying, "Nora is such a help to her mother." A help like I was not a daughter but a household feature. The first time grandma ever challenged it openly, I was 16. Leo had knocked over a full bowl of chili on the den carpet, and my mother turned toward me automatically and said, "Nora, clean that up." Grandma, from the recliner by the lamp, said, "Why, his hand's broken." Nobody moved. Leo laughed awkwardly. My father said, "Oh, come on, Mom." But grandma kept looking at him, not me. "He has 2 arms, Brenda, so does he, Arthur. Funny how the only person you've trained to move in this house is the girl." That sentence sat in the air like smoke. Nothing changed overnight. Families like mine never change overnight. They adapt around exposure. After that, my mother became more careful in front of grandma. My father called her old-fashioned when she objected. Leo acted embarrassed for maybe a week and then went right back to leaving bowls in the sink and towels on the floor because systems are easy to keep when they are built for your comfort. Still, something had shifted. Grandma started calling me directly, inviting me to lunch, slipping me folded cash for yourself, not the house, asking questions no one else asked, like whether I ever got tired. I always said I was fine. That was the answer daughters like me are trained to give before we even know the question. Then last winter, Grandma got sick for real, not dramatic at first, smaller appetite, more naps, a hospital stay that became two. The kind of decline that teaches a family exactly who they are. My parents showed up when there were forms to sign or relatives to impress. Leo came twice, both times in a hurry. I was the one who stayed through the long afternoons, lotion on her hands, tea gone cold at her bedside, listening when her voice dropped low and honest. 3 days before she died, she squeezed my wrist and said, "When they start arranging things after I'm gone, don't let them put you in the hallway." I thought she meant emotionally, I didn't realize she meant literally. Now, standing at that conference room door with my mother's hand still tightening on her purse, I understood. Mr. Sterling opened a file, looked at me, and then pulled a sealed envelope from the inside pocket. My name was written across the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Mr. Sterling did not hand me the envelope. He opened it himself. That mattered because the moment the seal broke, the room stopped being my mother's to manage. The paper inside was cream, folded once, my grandmother's handwriting slanting hard across the top of the first page. Even before he started reading, my mother said, "This feels unnecessary." Mr. Sterling glanced at her over his glasses. "Your mother did not seem to think so." Then he began. "If Brenda has tried to put Nora in the hallway, then I was right about more than I wanted to be." My mother actually went still. My father let out the softest exhale through his nose, the sound he made whenever a woman was being inconvenient in writing. Sterling kept going, "Read this in front of everyone, because if my family has done one thing consistently, it is ask Nora to do the work in private and swallow the insult in silence. I would like just once for the room to hear it whole." No one moved. Leo stopped pretending not to listen. I did not breathe properly until Sterling turned the page. "I have watched that girl clear plates while her brother stayed seated, miss dances to care for relatives who barely remembered her name, wash shirts for a boy old enough to own his own hands, and stand 2 steps behind every family photograph like she was staff someone forgot to dismiss." My mother made a small noise. "Oh, for heaven's sake, do you want me to stop?" Sterling asked. She looked at my father. That was answer enough. He read on. "When a family decides one child is the future, they almost always decide another child is the labor. In this house, Leo was praised for existing. Nora was thanked only when she was useful." That sentence landed so hard it felt physical, not because it was new, because it had never been said out loud in front of all of them before. Sterling's voice remained flat, professional, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I do not write this because I pity Nora. I write it because she has been trained to mistake endurance for character, and the rest of you have been happy to let her." Leo laughed once under his breath, nervous, dismissive, the way boys raised like kings laugh when the room suddenly describes the kingdom accurately. Grandma had accounted for that too. "If my grandson laughs while this is read, tell him that being adored is not the same thing as being worthy." The laugh died in his throat. My father shifted in his chair. "This is absurd." Sterling ignored him. He turned another page. "I remember the chili on the carpet. I remember the school mornings. I remember Brenda handing Nora tasks like little tests of devotion and Arthur calling it good preparation." Preparation for what? For becoming unpaid help to people who share her blood. I looked at my mother then, not because I wanted to see guilt. I had stopped expecting guilt to arrive on time in that family years ago. I wanted to see whether she even recognized herself. She did. That was the worst part. I could see it in the way she pressed her lips together and stared at the table. Like if she went blank enough, the letter might become a mean instead of true. Sterling continued. "When I asked Nora at 16 whether she was ever tired, she lied and told me she was fine. That is what girls like her do when they have already learned that naming the burden only gets it shifted back onto them." I had forgotten that conversation, or maybe not forgotten, buried. My grandmother on the porch, a glass sweating in her hand, watching me say I'm fine with the same dead little smile I used on my mother when I was trying not to be assigned something else. Leo finally said, "So what? Grandma writes one bitter letter and now we're all villains." Sterling folded one corner down with his thumb and said, "No, the years did that. Your grandmother only took notes." That silenced him. Then came the line that changed the room. "If Nora is in that office today, then I have failed to protect her fully in life, which means I must be precise in death, before any division of property, sentiment, furniture, jewelry, or claims of family fairness are discussed. Instruct Mr. Sterling to retrieve the black ledger from the false bottom of my pantry flour bin and place it in Nora's hands. My mother's head snapped up, my father went white first, then red. That was the first interesting reaction all morning. Not to the letter, to the ledger. Sterling lowered the pages and looked directly at my father. Do you know what she's referring to? He answered too fast. No, my mother did not say anything at all. And that told me more than his denial did, because my mother had many talents, but surprise was not one she wore well. What crossed her face wasn't confusion, it was dread. Sterling refolded the letter carefully, set it beside his file and said, "We will pause the reading." "For what?" my father demanded. "To retrieve the ledger your mother clearly considered relevant," Leo scoffed. "This is insane, it's probably some old grocery notebook." Sterling looked at him the same way doctors look at confident idiots in emergency rooms. "That will be easy enough to confirm." Then he turned to me. "Miss Vance, I suggest you come with me." My mother stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "That won't be necessary." Sterling's expression did not change. On the contrary, he said, "Your mother was very clear, Nora stays." And for the first time in my life, my father looked at me not like help, not like background, not like the daughter he could instruct from across the room, but like someone who might already be holding the wrong end of the story. My father stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "You are not going into that house digging through my mother's pantry like grave robbers." Sterling did not even flinch. "Then you should have hoped she left less specific instructions." That was the moment my mother made her mistake. Not a big one, just one sentence too fast. "It won't be there." The room turned toward her. My father looked at her. Leo looked at her, and Sterling, who had spent the last 15 minutes sounding like Patience in a tie, finally let a little steel into his voice. "That is a very interesting thing to know with such certainty, Mrs. Vance." She opened her mouth, closed it, and then tried the old family trick of turning speed into innocence. "I only mean my mother moved things constantly toward the end." No one believed her, not fully, not cleanly. Because there is a difference between confusion and foreknowledge, and my mother had just stepped over it in heels. Sterling called his assistant, asked for a witness from the office, then asked me to ride with him to my grandmother's house. My parents followed in their own car. Leo came too, complaining the whole way like inconvenience had somehow happened to him. The house felt wrong without Grandma in it, not haunted, just silenced. The kind of silence that settles when the only person in a family who told the truth has been removed from the room. Her kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon oil and tea. The ceramic cookie jar was still by the stove. Her cardigan still hung over the back of the breakfast chair. And for one stupid second, I expected her to come down the hallway and ask why we were all tracking mud across her floor. Sterling went straight to the pantry, not because he knew where the flour bin was, because my grandmother had once written directions the way other people built fences. Top shelf, blue tin, false bottom, that was all it said in his notes. My mother hovered 3 feet away pretending outrage. My father kept saying things like, "This is degrading. And you're making assumptions from an old woman's moods." Leo leaned against the doorway with his arms folded, bored already. As if his grandmother's last instructions were interrupting something more important in his day. Sterling pulled down the blue flour tin. He emptied half the flour into a mixing bowl from the counter, then tapped the bottom once with his knuckle. Hollow, no one spoke. He slid a butter knife under the inner rim and lifted. The false bottom came up clean. Inside was a black ledger. My mother actually sat down. That was how I knew she had seen it before, not read it maybe, but seen it. Known enough to be afraid of it. The cover was worn smooth at the edges, Grandma's handwriting on the front. Household record, private. Sterling opened it at the kitchen table. The first pages looked harmless. Grocery tallies, utility notes, repair dates. Then he turned to a page marked with a strip of red ribbon, and the room changed. At the top, in Grandma's neat slanted script, were 4 words, "What Nora has carried." No one moved. Sterling read silently for a second, then passed the book to me. I don't know what I expected, not that. Page after page, dates, tasks, hours, missed school events, canceled weekends, meals cooked, laundry loads, doctor visits. I took Grandma too because my parents were busy with Leo babysitting for my cousins when my mother volunteered me without asking. The summer I was 17, there were entries for every day Leo trained for baseball camp. Breakfast made, uniform washed, lunch packed, room cleaned, cleats found, ride arranged. Beside 3 of those entries, Grandma had written in the margin, "Mother called this nothing." Another section was worse, money. My graduation gift from Aunt Clara. Borrowed for family groceries. My part-time paycheck from the pharmacy taken toward household costs while Leo's tournament fees were paid in full. The small college savings account Grandma had started for me when I was 10 closed, transferred. Used for Leo's first semester housing deposit. I sat there with the ledger open in my hands and felt something split cleanly inside me. Not because I had never known my parents favored him, because favoritism is one thing, documentation is another. Pain you can survive, proof rearranges your spine. Leo stepped forward then, finally interested. What is this supposed to prove? I looked up at him, and before I could answer, Sterling reached across the table, flipped ahead 6 pages and said, perhaps this part. He turned the ledger toward my father. Taped across both pages were copies of 2 checks. One from Grandma to my parents marked for Nora education only. One bank receipt showing the funds withdrawn 3 weeks later, and combined with a payment to West Coast Elite Baseball Academy. My father went gray around the mouth. My mother started crying. Leo frowned, genuinely confused, which somehow made me angrier than if he had laughed. What does that even have to do with me? He asked. Grandma had answered that too. Sterling, read the line directly beneath the receipt. He benefits, so he will claim innocence. That is how golden sons are built. The kitchen went completely still. Then Sterling turned one more page. A sealed note was taped inside the back cover. On the outside, in Grandma's handwriting, if the ledger is found, read this only after they deny everything. My father stood up. I'm done with this. Sterling put one hand on the note. You may be, he said, but your mother wasn't. And for the first time that afternoon, nobody tried to stop him when he broke the seal. Sterling broke the seal. The paper inside was thinner than the earlier letter, but the handwriting was sharper, less affectionate, more final. The kind of writing people do when they are no longer trying to persuade anyone of anything. He read the first line out loud. If they are hearing this, then they have already lied in my kitchen. My mother made a sound like she had been struck. My father did not sit back down. Sterling kept going. Arthur will say Leo knew nothing. Brenda will say Nora was loved in her own way. Leo will look confused because confusion has always been the cleanest shirt laid out for him. Leo's face flushed immediately. That's ridiculous, he said. Sterling read right through him. I am tired of the family story that Nora was merely helpful. Helpful is bringing a casserole. Helpful is driving someone to an appointment. 23 years of unpaid service inside your own childhood is not help. It is extraction dressed as virtue. No one moved. I heard the refrigerator hum, the clock over the stove tick once. My father crossed his arms, but it was too late for posture now. The note had the room. Sterling turned the page. I watched Brenda let that girl eat last for years. I watched Arthur praise his son for breathing and his daughter for scrubbing pans. I watched college money disappear into baseball, groceries become lessons, and every protest recast as disrespect. If you are standing in this kitchen pretending you do not remember, then age has not made me cruel, only accurate. My mother started crying harder, not because the words were unfair, because they were exact. That distinction matters. Sterling lowered the paper for 1 second and looked at my father. Do you want me to stop? Dad's jaw tightened. No, interesting. Maybe he still thought endurance could save face. Maybe he wanted to hear how bad it could get so he could later call it exaggeration. Men, like him, often think surviving the reading means winning the argument. He had no idea what was still coming. Sterling resumed. 3 years ago, after the education money was gone and Leo still took clean shirts from the laundry room without shame, I changed my will. There it was, not the house, not the ledger, the will. My father went utterly still. My mother lifted both hands to her mouth. Leo said, changed it how? Sterling did not answer him. He just kept reading Grandma's words. I told Mr. Sterling to stop thinking of my estate as family comfort and start thinking of it as a final correction. Correction, that word landed like something metallic on tile. I looked at Sterling then, and for the first time that day I saw it in his face too. Not surprise, anticipation. He already knew what the note was leading toward. He had probably known all morning, and was just letting the family walk into each door in the order Grandma intended. Sterling, read the next paragraph more slowly. If Brenda cries, let her tears do not return what was taken. If Arthur speaks of fairness, ask him whether fairness ever once required Leo to wash his own plate. If Leo says he never asked for any of it, remind him that comfort accepted for 23 years is also a choice. Leo actually snapped. Then I was a kid. I turned toward him before Sterling could answer. You were 22 when I was still doing your laundry. That shut him up. Because the worst lies in families are not usually factual, they are proportional. He wanted childhood to cover everything. It didn't, not even close. Sterling continued. There is a photograph in the oak frame on my living room shelf from Easter 15 years ago. Everyone smiles. Nora is 3 steps behind the chairs holding a serving bowl. If anyone in that kitchen still doubts what I mean, tell them to look at the picture and ask themselves why the only daughter who made the meal was not allowed to sit in it. I closed my eyes for 1 second. I knew the photograph, pink cardigan, ham glaze on my wrist. My mother calling me from the stove just before the camera flashed. I had forgotten that part until Grandma put it back in my body with 1 sentence. My father looked away first. That was important too, not because shame had arrived fully, because memory had. Sterling reached the final paragraph. Do not comfort them before the reading finishes. They have mistaken Nora's softness for consent too many times already. Put them back in their chairs, take them to the office, and finish exactly as written. The note ended there. No signature flourish, just Beatrice Vance in steady dark ink. The kitchen stayed quiet for several seconds after Sterling folded the note. My mother was openly crying now, but it did not change the air. My father looked like someone who had just realized the house, the ledger, the note, none of it was accidental. Grandma had not left chaos, she had left sequence. Leo finally said, softer now. What does she mean, finish exactly as written? Sterling put the note back into the ledger and closed it. It means, he said, we return to the office. My father stepped toward the table. No, we can discuss this here. Sterling looked at him with something close to boredom. No, he said. You can hear it where your mother wanted Nora excluded. That sentence hit my mother hardest of all, because suddenly the whole day had shape. The hallway, the room, the letter, the ledger, the note. Grandma had built every step to force the family pattern into the open first, before the money ever entered. And as Sterling picked up the ledger and motioned for us to leave, I realized the final reading was not going to be about grief. It was going to be about consequence. When we got back to Mr. Sterling's office, nobody tried to put me in the hallway. That was the first correction, small, temporary, but real. My mother sat down without speaking. My father looked older than he had 2 hours earlier. Leo kept glancing at the black ledger like it might still transform into something less damaging if he stopped looking directly at it. It didn't. Sterling waited until we were all seated. Then he opened the will. No long speech, no theater. Just my grandmother's voice translated into legal language and final choices. Specific cash gifts to the church library and the women's shelter. Her wedding ring to Aunt Clara. The antique clock to her brother. Then the house, the residence on Cedar Crest Way, together with all furnishings not otherwise designated, shall pass in full to my granddaughter, Nora Vance. My mother shut her eyes. My father's face did not change at first. That was how he handled impact, by going very still and hoping control might return if he looked disciplined enough. Leo said what? Sterling kept reading. The investment account listed in Schedule B, the bond portfolio listed in Schedule C, and the cash reserve held at Pacific Trust shall also pass in full to Nora Vance. That was the real blow, not the house. The fact that Grandma had not left behind one comforting little compromise they could use to call the outcome unfair. No shared pool, no balanced division, no family pot for my parents to supervise while praising Leo's future and assigning me gratitude as a duty. Just my name again and again. My father finally found his voice. That makes no sense. Sterling looked at him. It made perfect sense to your mother. Leo laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. So she gave everything to Nora because she washed dishes. I turned toward him before Sterling could answer. No, I said, she gave it to me because everybody else in this family treated me like I was part of the kitchen. That landed harder than I expected. Maybe because it was the first thing I had said all day that was simple enough not to hide behind. Sterling turned one page and went on. There is one final instruction regarding any challenge to this will. Of course there was. Grandma had never once set a table without planning the cleanup. If any beneficiary contests this will or attempts to pressure Nora Vance into private redistribution outside counsel, that individual's remaining share shall be revoked and redirected to the Beatrice Vance Fund for Girls in Transitional Housing. Leo's head snapped up. Remaining share? Sterling nodded once. Your grandmother did leave you something. He reached into the file and pulled out a smaller envelope. Leo's name. My brother took it like it might bite him. Inside was a handwritten note and a cashier's check, $5,000. That was all. Leo stared at the amount like it was an insult in numeric form. Sterling read the note when Leo didn't. Leo, this is enough for a deposit, a mattress, and your first month of learning where your plates go when no woman is following behind you. Love, Grandma. I actually had to press my lips together to keep from laughing. My mother made a scandalized sound. My father stood halfway up. This is humiliating. Sterling folded the note. No, he said. What was humiliating was making your daughter carry your house and calling it character. No one spoke after that, and for the first time in 23 years, the silence in the room was not mine to fill. The fallout came fast. My mother cried in the parking lot and told me she never meant for things to become so uneven. That was her word, uneven, as if my entire life had been a tablecloth slightly off-center instead of a system built on my labor. My father tried one last angle the following week. He asked to meet his family. I agreed only because Sterling told me never meet a desperate man alone when there's inheritance on the table. Dad sat across from me in a diner and talked for 14 minutes without once saying the words I was wrong. He said Grandma had been emotional, that she let old grudges color her judgment, that I was not the kind of person who needed all that money anyway. That sentence told me everything. Even then, even after the ledger, even after the note, even after the will, he still thought my strength made me easier to strip. I stood up, put cash on the table for my coffee and said that's why she gave it to me. Then I left. Leo moved out within 3 weeks. Apparently $5,000 and a dead grandmother's contempt will teach a man more about adulthood than 23 years of being served ever did. Last I heard, he learned to cook 2 things badly and stopped calling women dramatic when they asked him to wash a dish. My mother kept writing short letters at first, then longer ones, apologies that circled the truth before finally landing on it. The only one I kept said this: I think I confused your reliability with your role. I let the house depend on you because it was easier than asking the men in it to change. That one hurt because it was true. As for me, I kept the house. Not out of revenge, because for the first time in my life, I wanted to live somewhere I had not earned by serving the people inside it. I repainted the kitchen, moved the table so nobody sat at the head by default, framed the Easter photo Grandma mentioned and hung it in the hallway. Not because I wanted to remember the humiliation, but because I wanted proof that someone had seen it clearly long before I did. Sometimes I still catch myself standing when nobody asked me to, still reaching for plates after other people have sat down. That kind of training doesn't evaporate just because a lawyer reads the truth out loud. But now, when I notice it, I sit. That is what inheritance became for me in the end. Not the accounts, not the house, permission to stop performing usefulness in exchange for belonging. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. If that had happened to you, would you have stayed through the whole reading or walked out the moment your mother tried to put you in the hallway? And once the truth was finally read in front of everyone, would you ever let that family call you helpful again? Tell me in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to see you in the next one. Disclaimer: this video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.